Guys, if you can hear this on Twitter, on Facebook, and on YouTube, this is the first live episode of 2023 of the Matt Haycox show. So feel free to jump in and comment, etc. And for everybody who is going to hear this on the recorded version, we will go now. Guys, it's Matt Haycox here, and welcome to another episode of the Matt Haycox show, where I've got a great guest that I'm very, very excited to talk to. We've got Erik Allen in the house. Erik has got so many things that we're going to be talking about today. He's got a very, very interesting background, come from a broken home, beating up his mom's boyfriend at the age of 13, which I'm definitely very interested to talk about. He's been jailed at 18, he's been bankrupt at 21, he's battled addictions, and for the last 16 plus years, he's been sober. He hosts the Erik Allen Show, which is his podcast. He's had some great guests on there, and he's also been a guest himself on many, many great podcasts. So super excited to have him. Today we're going to be talking about being consistent. We're going to be talking about networking. We're going to be talking about podcasting and a lot more. Erik and I had a good little natter before we came on this, and I'm excited to dig deep. So Erik, welcome to the show, buddy. Thanks for being here.
Oh man, it's such an honor to be here, dude. Your show is so awesome, dude. I'm so excited to be here, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, listen, it almost sounds sinister to get in there with it, but I guess from a morbid curiosity, what the fuck happened to end up with you hitting your mom's boyfriend with a metal pan?
Yeah, it's an interesting childhood. My parents got divorced when I was 11 years old. I didn't know anybody who had gotten a divorce or even knew what that word was, man. And my mom got together with this guy who was very physically abusive almost immediately, which I thought was just strange. I don't know what's going on, right? But I remember there was days where I was outside looking through their bedroom window and he'd be hitting her with a cordless phone, like back in the day when those were around. And I would call the police, they'd show up. My mom would never press charges, which drove me nuts. So this guy just kept doing this over and over. And this is where I grew up in Washington State. And then they decided to get pregnant and they moved us from Washington State. It was me, my sister, who's 4 years younger than me, and then new baby boy, and them up to Stevensville, Montana, which is a population of 1,200 people. We lived on 5 acres of property, 2 ponds, this house there by the Bitterroot River. It was a beautiful property. The problem was the house had 3 bedrooms. It was one for them, one for my little brother, and one for my sister. And they said, Erik, you get to live in the garage. So I literally had a plastic tarp down the middle of the garage, and my bed was on one half, but luckily that half had the fireplace. So it would keep me semi-warm in the middle of those really cold nights in the winter of Montana. And, it was one night I was brushing my teeth. It was around 13 years old. They came home arguing one night. Wasn't anything different than any other night. But I remember as I was brushing my teeth, I felt like God was like, dude, you got to see what's going on. And so behind me was the kitchen to the pantry to the garage where my room was at. As I peeked around the corner, I could see this man on top of my mom just punch her in the face. Boom, 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 one after the other. I was like, dude, I got to stop this thing. So I walked up and I grabbed a cast iron pan out of the cupboard and I just swung as hard as I could and I split the back of his head open. And he turned around and he said, what then? As he said that, I took another swing, split his forehead open, still didn't knock him out. I'd fallen on the ground. He stood up over me. He was bleeding down his face and he starts to yell. My mom jumps up like with mama bear power, lands like 6 punches in a row, blood splatting on the wall. It was chaos. Cops show up, take him in jail. Of course, my mom doesn't press charges. And I'm thinking I'm like this hero. Yeah. And then what ended up happening was I got kicked out of that house. I had 3 months left of my freshman year of high school and went to live with my buddy in downtown Stevensville. We would steal cigarettes from his dad in the morning and walk to school. And that set me on this path of destruction for the next 10 years of my life.
How was your life and I guess your behavior and stuff prior to that? Had you always been a bit of a tearaway kid, a naughty kid prior? Were you very negatively impacted as a real youngster by your mom and the broken home?
No, it's interesting. My mom and my dad, I would say a pretty normal childhood. We went to Sunday school at church. I played baseball as a kid. My dad liked to take us out on adventures and go out to the middle of the desert where people would just dump stuff. So we'd go try to find treasure. My best friend, Dave, I've had him, my best friend since first grade. My dad would take Dave and I, and he would take us to behind big stores and throw us in dumpsters and say, go find stuff, go find treasures. Like we would always do that. I had a great childhood up to the point of my parents getting divorced at 11 years old. Oddly enough, I don't remember ever having a dinner at the table with my family, whereas my dad, my sister, me, having a conversation. I don't remember that. It's weird. I don't know if it's just blocked from my memory. My wife is the same. Like, she came from a broken home. We don't remember these things. Maybe they just didn't happen. I remember sitting in front of TV on TV trays and stuff like that. But childhood was pretty good for me up until 11 years old. After that, it just got crazy.
And how's your relationship now with your mom or with your dad?
Oddly enough, they both live out in Texas, where my sister lives. So I grew up in Washington. That's where they're at. And my sister has gotten both of them to move out to Texas to be by them. I'm not close with them. I have probably a text relationship with my dad, maybe once a month. I prefer not to talk with my mom. We talk probably once a quarter, and that's about it, via text. And I like it that way. I told my wife when I met her, I'm like, I want 20 acres and I want to sit a house in the middle, and I don't want anybody to be around us. My goal is to be able to go ahead.
I was going to say, is your mom still with the guy from back then? The one when you were the kid, she's still with that guy now?
She's not. She was with him for a while. I got together with another guy who was an alcoholic. I think pushed her around a little bit. And then now with a guy that I've never met, but she's been with for a few years now. And I guess he's a pretty wealthy guy. So she lives down in Texas with him.
I mean, have you got kids yourself?
I do. My kids are 13 and 10.
Okay. I mean, I never get it. Obviously, I'm not a violent guy anyway, and I guess, well, I was going to say, even if I was, I don't know where this conversation is going to go. So I better change my words. But obviously, I'm not a violent guy, and I absolutely could not, see myself hitting my missus or condoning that kind of behaviour.
Totally.
That said, in the heat of the moment, I can probably sometimes see why things happen between partners, etc. But as a parent, I can never, ever, ever come to terms with the concept of parents who beat their kids, parents who abuse their kids, parents who take the side of a non-blood relation or even a blood relation. I mean anything. I mean, for me, I know it's obviously cliche to talk about, your job as a parent is to be a protector, etc. But I just also think from my perspective, like, fuck the job, fuck the history or the cliches or whatever. As a parent, how do you ever feel anything else other than super love and protection and everything? And I could, obviously want to hear your story. It's not a unique story. You hear a lot of these kind of things, but I just can never ever get my head around the concept of how people can behave with their kids. I mean, I am very blessed with I've got a 16-year-old and I've got a daughter with my ex-wife, and I've got another one on the way. And I am very blessed with the fact that literally in 16 years, I think I've had 2 raised voices with her. I mean, she's been an absolute angel of a child. I think she's probably set a very tricky precedent going forward for child number 2. I mean, even if she'd been naughty, I find it hard to even say, go away and get into your room. Never mind kick them out of the house. Beat the shit out of them. It's just another fucking world.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, my sister and myself and my brother, we were not protected by my mom. Like that, she chose this alcoholic, violent guy over us. And, I made it a decision when I got married that my kids would never experience that. My wife and I, we're breaking the chains of divorce, addiction, abuse, and rejection. And we're changing the trajectory of the Allen tribe moving forward. And our family, hopefully, our kids will never experience that. And hopefully for legacies to come, that will stay the same.
Well, let's jump on from when from I guess leaving high school, and you started on your path of destruction, or I guess future unfortunate behaviour. I mean, you became an alcoholic. You went bankrupt. Put a little bit of context around that, and then tell me what was the pivotal moment, the wake up call, the change that set you on a better path.
Yeah, for me, so when I moved back to Washington to live with my dad for my sophomore through senior year of high school, I got into drugs early. So I was smoking pot before school, during lunch, after school. And then that led to, taking acid, taking mushrooms, opium, pharmaceuticals, whatever I could get my hands on. Looking back, I was numbing that pain that I went through. But at the time, I was just like, I was loving it, right? And when I was 18 years old, I was still a senior in high school. I actually got arrested for having a bong, which is now, it's funny because in Washington now, it's illegal to have that. But in 1998, when I was a senior, it was not. So I had to go spend a night in jail. I was 145 pounds, black and white chain gang outfit on, bright orange slippers, scared to death. And that was kind of the beginning of the more messiness that would come. And so I just continued to do that. I didn't have a great relationship with my dad. He rented a house for him and I, and he would go stay with his girlfriend. I'd see him a couple times in the month in passing, and that's it. He'd put $20 in the cup for my lunch money and put food in the freezer, and that was it. And 2 weeks after I graduated high school, I woke up to a Post-it note that said, "You can't comply with house rules. You have 48 hours to get out." And so from there, between the age of 18 and 21, I moved 21 times. I was living on couches here, couches there, like all over the place, couple days there, things like that, and made my way up to Seattle, Washington. I always wanted to be in the music business. I'm not a music player, but or musician, but I always wasn't. I love music and I wanted to be around that. And so I came up to Seattle, ended up landing with Universal Records, dream job. I interned there for 6 months, never got paid, just showed up 6 days a week, and was living a rockstar lifestyle because I had open tab and I was going to 2 to 3 concerts a week. And then I got paid. They were like, after 6 months, like, "Hey man, we want to hire you on." So I was like their mailroom coordinator. So I was setting up tracking sales and I was setting up meet and greets and things like that. And on my 1-year anniversary, I got laid off. This was during the days of Napster, if people remember that. But it killed the music industry. And so I went into even more of this depression. So here I was, this rockstar lifestyle, drinking and drugs backstage all the time, and get laid off from Universal. And I don't know what to do. I'm working at night at Starbucks, and I'd get off work and go drink a 6-pack of beer at my ghetto apartment and pass out every day. That was my routine. I had no direction. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And there was one night this girl walked into Starbucks. She had 20 seconds of courage to walk up to me and said, "Hey, you know what? We've got this cool college age event down at our church. Would you be interested in going?" And I'm depressed. I have no friends, and she's good looking. What time do I need to be there? Right. And so I go down to this church event and I run into all these guys that I knew from 4 or 5 years earlier. And I was like, "What are you doing here? Like, this is crazy." And so for me, I felt God was planting a seed in me that moment. Like, there's going to be some changes coming. And a month later is Easter 2004. I went out and partied like a rock star with a band I was managing. And I woke up Easter morning surrounded by probably 15 guys. And I felt God go, "Dude, you're done. You're going to go down this path that's going to end your life real quick." And so I decided to give my life to Christ in that moment. And I quit cold turkey, drugs, drinking, cigarettes, everything in that moment. And I text that girl and I said, "Hey, thank you for inviting me to that church event. Maybe I'll see you at the store sometime." And we were dating a month later. And now she's my wife of 18 years.
Were you already a religious guy before this thing? I mean, I know you've mentioned in conversation a couple of times, I thought God was telling me to do this, or I thought God was showing me that. But then obviously you just mentioned giving your life to Christ.
Yeah.
I mean, you were already semi-religious and then you went all in, or this was like you were not religious or didn't believe in God at all and then woke up one day?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up going to the church, so I think I've always had, a thought process of Jesus and God and being involved and being kind and love people and treat people how you want to be treated. I've always had that mentality, and I think I was just feeling lost in that moment and felt like, you know what, it was time to just give up on that craziness that I've been living. And the way that I got out of that was I had changed my environment, and so instead of the party scene, I decided to go hang around guys that were going to the church that had great businesses. They were great entrepreneurs. They were great married people. Like they treated their wives great. And I started surrounding myself with those guys. And pre-podcasting days, I was like saying, "Hey, I want to understand your story. I want to know, like, what can I do to do what you're doing?" And I would take them out to Starbucks and I would just sit there and interview them. And I did that to a lot of guys that were going to the church, man. It helped me get on this right path mentally, physically, but also in my business and mentally. Like, how can I get my life better? And man, it's been an awesome journey.
Well, obviously, I know you have the podcast now. We're gonna go and talk about that in a minute. But I mean,
yeah.
What happened to you? What happened to you work-wise, career-wise? I guess since this wake-up call, since changing your life. I mean, what have you been up to? Have you been sharing this message? Have you been helping others? What's your charisma? What's your career look like?
Yeah, so I didn't share my story till I was 39 years old. I'm 43 now, so just in the last 4 years did I share my story. And I've done sales. Basically, I left Starbucks at that point and decided to start making some real money and started doing sales and account management and things like that. And I've done that for the last 20 years. And it's been fun. I still work full-time job. The goal is to walk away from the full-time job, though, by the end of this year. Picking up the podcast and sponsorships and coaching people and, doing things for my own personal clients. So that's what I do now is I still work full time, but my real big focus, my purpose, my passion is podcasting and coaching and connecting and networking.
Well, look, let's talk about the podcast then, because I guess I always say to people, when I talk about my podcast or any of my recording, that one of the one of the real benefits for me is that I get to sit down with with great guests. I get to sit down with people that I'd like to be mentored by or pick the brains of. And I always say, if nobody ever watches or listens, I don't care, because this is like a private conversation that anybody listening or watching is lucky enough to get to second hand hear the brain picking of. So as you and I talked about just before we started recording, I recorded a podcast with John Lee Dumas a week or so ago. He's one of the daddies of podcasting. 7 days a week, 12 years, or certainly 10 years, and making a good 7-figure income from that now. And I really got some great benefit from picking his brains at the time. But God, I'd love to hear your story. Did you listen to podcasts before you started your own? How did you get into it? And I guess were you looking to do it for money, or just for fun at the time?
Yeah, I did it just for fun. Like I said, I had an apparel company in 2012. It was focused on MMA, and I got bored with the company in 2015. Decided what was I, trying to figure out what I was going to do, and so I started this podcast in 2017. I called it a podcast. I wouldn't say it was a podcast, though. I literally was FaceTiming guys and recording my conversation with MMA fighters and asking them, like, why do you want to get in cage? You get punched in the face. Like, that was my one question that I asked them. And then I would kind of deep dive into their story a little bit. But I was in a walk-in closet for probably my first 100 episodes. I had bad lighting, bad microphone, didn't even look into the camera. And I would just ask these guys questions, and I would record it, upload it to YouTube, share that link out to Facebook, and call that my podcast. Did that for almost 100 episodes. And then one person said, well, how can I listen to it on Apple? And I said, what the hell is that? I didn't even know what Apple Podcast was. And I was like, whoa, I am missing a massive amount of people that could be listening to my story if I'm on Apple. And so I started researching like crazy. I was watching tons of videos. Took me a couple months to just deep dive in, like, how do I get this thing set up? Where do I connect it? What's an RSS feed? How do I distribute it out to Pandora and, all these other different channels? And then I just started doing that. And that's what opened the door. And in 2018, I came across Ed Milet on YouTube while searching for motivational videos. It inspired me to start my own entrepreneurial podcast. So 2019, I started the Erik Allen Show and just started focusing on entrepreneur stories. I wanted to also ask them why they got punched in the face. As entrepreneurs, we get punched in the face all the time. We get no's, we get rejected, we fail, we go bankrupt, but we keep going. What is it that pushes us through? And so I wanted to understand that from these bigger names, and been blessed to speak with awesome guys like Sean Whalen and Brad Lee and Ed Milet, Tim Story, and Jim the Rookie Morris, and Vedras Kulian, and just so many others. And we're about almost 200 episodes in now on the Erik Allen Show. And that's where it started, though, this walk-in closet. And now here we are, ranked in the top 2.5% globally.
I mean, just to give a bit of what's the word? Let's say inspiration and belief on persistence for people who are deep into their own podcast and concerned that that not enough people are watching, or not enough people are listening. I mean, how long did it take for you to build an audience?
It's funny. I never looked at the numbers at all. I never looked at a download number or anything like that until I was probably 4 years into this thing. Like in the last year. I never cared. For me, I wanted to do podcasting and talk with people because I wanted to do it. And I love talking with people. I love that relationship building. And when I started looking number, I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, people are actually listening. So I really started just looking at numbers in the last 4 years. In the last year. But I would say if you're an early podcaster, don't even worry about the numbers. Don't look at the numbers. It will distract you. It will discourage you from moving forward. I just don't worry about it. I did podcasting because I loved it and I wanted to have these awesome conversations, and I still do today. Like, I don't really look at the numbers. I look at who can I impact with the guests that I'm bringing on. And so when people reach out and they want to, like, if I talk about sponsorships, right, they all say, well, how many downloads do you have? I'm like, I don't know. I don't care. I'm not selling you on my number of downloads. I'm selling you on the value that I'm going to bring you. I'm going to promote you on my show, and I'm going to distribute that show out to these channels, and I'm going to give you some shout outs. And that's what I sell my sponsorship on. I never sell on, I've had 10,000 downloads or 5,000 downloads. I don't give that number out. If people ask them, like, I'll be honest with them, like, I don't know. Some numbers are 15,000, 10,000. Sometimes it's 500. It depends on my guest. Right. So I just don't sell on the number. So I don't worry about it. as a podcaster, I would say just don't do that. Don't look at the numbers, especially if you're first starting.
Well, let's talk about guest booking or getting booked yourself, because I mean, look, there's many different kinds of format for podcasts, but a regular, I guess, a regular fallback for many people is going down the interview route. I think it always. I mean, obviously, I love it because it provides great conversation. It provides the great chance to pick the brains of others. But I think for people who want to start a podcast and not too sure about what they're going to say, or a bit less confident, or don't want to have to hold the whole stage on their own, having that guest to take the pressure off them is a great starting point. But how do you go about booking your guests? And in the same question, how did you get booked on some great podcasts yourself? I mean, you've mentioned names that mean a lot to me. I don't know how familiar some of these are with the guys watching and listening, but your Ed Milet's, your Sean Whalen's, Bradley. I'm a massive Bradley fan. I think he's the coolest never mind just podcast, but one of the coolest guys out there. I love that relaxed southern drawl, but he's a very humorous guy, but got some serious nuggets of information underneath it. But how do you go and book your guests?
99% of my guests I book through Instagram DM, and I do not send a template. I would say if you're going to try to book people on your show, don't send a template where you're just changing the name at the top and it's like this pitch to them. Don't do that. If you want to book people on your show, pull out your phone, take 30 seconds to look at their page and see what they're promoting. Maybe it's a course, maybe it's a book, or maybe it's an awesome post that resonated with you. Pull out your phone, do a quick video. And I literally will say, hey, Ed, what's going on? It's Erik out here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I know that you have a house out here and you just released the book, Power of One More. Let me help you promote that. Let's jump on the show. Let's chat soon. 30 seconds. That's it. Send the video via Instagram to folks. Like I said, 99% of my guests are booked with that method there. And it's opened up tons of doors. I did that with Brad Lee. We had a great conversation. And then what ended up happening was I got on his show. He invited me to come down. I flew down to Vegas and I was a guest on Dropping Bombs last year. And it was the coolest thing ever to go meet him in person. If you want to promote your podcast, the best thing you can do is get on other people's podcasts and then share that show that you were on with your network as well. I did in 2021, I was a guest on 117 other podcasts on top of releasing 100 of my own. And I did that because I purposely went out and found Facebook groups and I found specific channels of people that were looking for guests. And I just said, here's my story. If it resonates with your podcast, I'd love to be a guest on your show. And I put it out there. I said, my goal is to be a guest on 100 podcasts this year. Help me achieve that. And if I can bring value to your show, let's do it. And I was almost on a guest or had a guest on my show almost every day of 2021. And that's how we ended up blowing up there.
And do you always do it with a guest, or do you ever talk on your own?
You know what's funny? I have never done a solo show until yesterday. I didn't even release it. I recorded a solo show yesterday because a friend of mine named Tad said, you should do a reintroduction to you episode. And I'd never thought about that. Like people know my story, but I hadn't really shared that out with probably some of my new listeners since I started. And so I actually yesterday sat down and I was like, all right, we're just going to record a show. And I ended up talking for an hour, which I don't know if I like listening to my voice just myself for an hour, but it was good to just get that out. And I'm excited to release it sometime in the next couple months or so. We'll drop it.
So how far ahead, how far in advance do you work? How far in advance are you recording?
Most of my shows drop about a month and a half to 2 months out. And I don't really try to do that on purpose. I would like to do that sooner, but because of my schedule, my shows drop weekly. And so I just go out there and release one show at a time. Now, occasionally I'll drop a bonus episode. If I have time to go and edit that and drop it in the middle of the week, I might do that. But typically it's a month and a half. I also only record 4 shows a month. So I only say, 4 times a month, I'm going to interview somebody, and the rest of the month I'm going to be a guest, or I'm going to work on my own course or editing or stuff like that. So I try to limit myself from recording too much. So I only record 4 shows a month. And right now I probably won't start recording again until sometime in late February, early March. I'm taking probably a month off.
Have you got any podcast horror stories or podcast humor stories?
Man, I'll tell you, podcasting, especially in the early days, is rough. There was a moment in one day I got to talk to Ken Shamrock and Ed Milet in the same day. And I had Ken Shamrock first, and I was recording on this platform called Ecamm on my Mac, and it was basically FaceTime and it was recording, right? And so I had Ken Shamrock on my show. I'm thinking, man, this guy's awesome. Like, I can't believe I'm talking to Ken Shamrock. And he kept getting texts. And every time he got a text, it would turn off my recorder. And about 2 minutes in, that happened for the first time. I said, Ken, I'm really sorry. Hey, the recorder turned off. Can I just turn that back on real quick? He's like, oh yeah, no problem. So I turned it back on. And then about 7 minutes into the interview, I look down and my recorder's off. I don't know when it turned off. I'm thinking, crap, I'm having this amazing conversation with Ken Shamrock and no one's going to hear it. Just me and Ken chatting right now. And I'm sweating bullets. I'm like, I cannot believe that this is happening. I finally get this huge name on my show and it's not recording. So I get done with the show. I'm like, hey, Ken, thanks so much, man. I just let it be. And then his team reached out to me like a week later and said, hey, we just wanted to say thanks. And we were having him on the show. And it was, how did it go? And I was like, oh, man, I'm sorry. I kept getting texts and my platform, for some reason, it stopped recording and I can't release anything. I really apologize, but thank you for reaching out. And they said, hey, let's just rebook them. And I was like, shut up, man. So I got to actually rebook it with them. But I'll tell you, after that first conversation with Ken that day, I was nervous as hell to record my conversation with Ed, that the same thing was going to happen. And man, I was sweating bullets, but the conversation with Ed was life-changing. We were supposed to have a 20-minute call and we ended up chatting for 30 minutes. And how I got the call was I won Ed Milet's Max Out Community Challenge on Instagram, where he said, submit a 1-minute story and tell me why you want to be successful, what drives you to be successful, and tag me on a story. He had about 1 million followers at the time. And I don't know how many submitted, but I submitted mine and he kept posting all these things like, here's a top runner. And then I wake up one day to a tag from Ed Milet and I was like mind blowing and it totally changed my life.
Oh, wow. So I've got my podcast issue, if you like, my podcast mental block is I'm always terrible with names, which I'm not in real life. It just must be some psychological issue that comes on when anytime the camera starts to record. Which I'm looking at your name now, and actually, I think it's probably impossible to get Erik Allen in any other way. So I think that's why I probably never stumbled when I was introducing you. But I mean, pretty much any other name, I can be completely perfect. And then as soon as the camera goes, I'm like, how do you say that name? How do you say that name? How do you say that name? I always seem to get there, but in my head, I drive myself crazy that I'm going to get it wrong. But I tell you, you talk about your camera not, your recorder not recording, and having to re-record with Ken. Years ago, I used to. This is before I had my own cameraman, who I have now. If I record the live ones, I used to use this freelance guy. Love him to bits, and he watches and listens to some of this stuff. So if he's listening, he knows I love him and hate him at the same time. But this particular day, we were recording in London. We used to batch record. If we had like celebrity guests or tried to book a few great guests at once, we'd get them all at the same time. So I literally recorded 5 or 6 at once in London. And there was an actor who'd been in Hollywood movies, well-known guy. There was a celebrity chef from the UK. We had literally 5 or 6 really good guests, and it took my whole day of recording. My whole headspace, because obviously you know yourself. I mean, doing one podcast, you need to concentrate on when you need to concentrate on 4 or 5 or 6, and I'm also dealing with work and texts and everything in the meantime. They are the fun days, but they're pretty exhausting days. Yeah. And I got to the end of this day, and everything was recorded live. Sat together in the house, and the cameraman also does the editing. So he's left the house and he said, "Yeah, I'm going to obviously go home, start to carve some edits up, and I'll send you the downloads on Dropbox or WeTransfer or whatever." Off he goes. I hear nothing. Next day, I get a phone call from my PR guys who booked him, and they're like, "We've got a problem." So what happened? He goes, "Well, it's called Cam." He goes, "Cam got robbed last night." He goes, "He's lost all the footage, but don't worry, he's safe." I'm thinking, he's safe? I don't give a fuck if he's safe. What do you mean he's lost the footage? And they were telling me this story, which obviously sounded like this poor guy had been robbed and beaten on the streets of London. So as much as I want to hate him, I'm trying to find some sympathy in me. Anyway, I've rung him up. I said, "What happened? Are you okay?" He said, "Well, I was hungry when I left your house." He goes, "So I drove to the kebab shop. And I went inside to get a kebab, and I left the hard drive with the cameras on the back seat but I left the car unlocked. So when I was getting the kebab, some people came past and opened the door and stole everything. I'm like, right, I absolutely have no sympathy for you now. I thought you'd been beaten to a pulp on the streets of London. You were getting a fucking kebab, and you've lost 5 or 6 of what would have been some of my best podcast episodes ever, which I never got to re-record any of them.
Oh man, what is crazy story though. That's awesome.
Kills me that guy.
Yeah. Oh man, so funny.
So, you had a podcast goal of whatever, getting on 100 shows, 150 shows, whatever it was. I mean, what about some 2023, 2024 podcast goals? Where's the future of Erik Allen?
Yeah, for me, now I kind of do probably 30 to 50 podcast spots throughout the year. And that's really a goal. I mean, it's not really a goal of mine to do that many, but probably 35 to 50 is what I'll end up doing. My goal has really shifted this year. For 2023, I want to help 100 people start and launch their podcast. And so I have a pre-recorded self-paced course on my website that people can buy. I also do live coaching, but my goal this year is really to impact more people. And so I want to help people launch podcasts. I believe that everyone should have a podcast. Here's the deal is 3 generations from now, my great grandkids are going to go, what was grandpa like? Great grandpa like? And nobody knows. Well, now they can go and find my voice. They can hear my emotion. They can see my emotions. They can hear my voice on YouTube and an Apple, right? And so it's this time-saving thing that I can now give to generations to come to my family. So I think everybody should have a podcast. I want to help 100 people launch a podcast this year. That's my goal. And when they go through my course, they get a 30-minute strategy call with me. And they also get a month of free sponsorship on my show of their show or their business or whatever they want to promote. I'll promote it for 1 month when they go through my course. And so that's my goal, man, is to help 100 people launch a podcast this year.
Well, listen, I mean, as a fellow podcast host myself, I can't agree anymore with the concept that, everybody should have a podcast. I mean, for so many different reasons. I mean, like you say, whether it's whether it's family legacy, whether it's the chance to get your voice heard, whether it's the chance to sit down with people that you probably wouldn't get the chance to sit down with anyway, unless you have that framing of that show. I couldn't agree more, Erik. And like I say, I'm sure you're going to impact on lots more than 100 people, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here today. I mean, before you go, obviously, for anyone who wants to find you anyway, and for anyone who wants to particularly find that podcasting course, just give yourself a shout out. Give us some web domains and some social handles.
Man, I appreciate that. It's erikallenmedia.com, ERIKALLEN, media.com. There's a ton of free resources on my website, but if you click on the resources tab when you get there, you'll see my paid courses and then all of the, resources that are free. I have a lot of books on there that I recommend. You can go check out. All the equipment that I use is listed on there as well. And I'm probably more on Instagram than any other platform. So it's Erik G. Allen on there, and you can connect with me. I respond to every comment and every DM. So if you have questions, reach out. Again, Instagram, Erik G. Allen or erikallenmedia.com, man. And Matt, it's been such an honor to be on your show, man. I love your questions. I love the flow and being on so many other guests, man. This is definitely probably in the top 10 shows that I've ever been a guest on, man. So I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate that, buddy, and I'm certainly going to come and check out some of your course and your content myself, because I can certainly benefit from some tips from a pro. So thank you very much for being here. And guys, I know that some of you guys watching and listening to this definitely have podcast aspirations, because I get messages all the time from you guys who want to do it and don't know when to start, don't know how to start. So please use Erik as your podcast light. Guys, if you've enjoyed listening to this, please make sure you like, subscribe, and tell your friends. If you've listened to me on Apple or Spotify or wherever you're listening, you can whiz over to YouTube and see my pretty face, but it's got a slightly bent nose from a very dangerous paddle tennis accident. And if you're watching on YouTube, but you want to have a week off without looking at me, please jump over to Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. You can find me anywhere. Like I say, all I ask is that you like or subscribe. And if you want to come and find me on social, make sure you hook up with me. I'm the Matt Haycox. That's TheMattHaycox on all things social. And until a future episode of the Matt Haycox Show, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and thanks for being here, Erik.
Man, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Right, let me press end broadcast.